Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Internal Rambles. This is your girl, Rochelle, and this is this is another
I'm sorry.
installment of the male perspective. If you haven't listened to the first installment, please do. That was
That's
released
me.
back in October of 2022. But this is the second installment, and just a quick background: Gio um, is a special guest, and he's one of my closest friends. And so we're gonna continue this installment of Internal Rambles, just talking about. We have been talking about relationships, and I think maybe this will evolve, but. Um, the second episode will be another relationship episode, and we'll see how it goes. So, Gio, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I didn't know we could talk about stuff other than relationships. That's good to know. But yeah, I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I was thinking moving forward, we can talk about different topics, but we have been talking about relationships. But, the male perspective, I think we can evolve into other things. So, that has been just my thought. It doesn't have to only be relationships moving forward. Um, but today we're talking about dating, and particularly dating in your 20s versus dating in your 30s. And so this is kind of an open discussion. I did write down maybe some topics to go over, but it's kind of an open discussion, and just how me and Gio are both in our 30s, and just how dating has changed, and what we have seen and experienced, and what we view, and the differences of how dating was when we were in our 20s, and then now, what it's like in our 30s. So, um, I can start with you, where you want to go, or I can pick a topic if you want. So, dating in the 20s, what was that? Or where do you want to start with that?
Mm, well, I guess I would say that dating in the 20s was kind of like very much like a different time, because you're like a different person because you're still, coming into your own and things like that. But I think a good place to start is kind of like what you're looking for slash willing to accept when you're in your 20s.
Yeah, very different. Um, so for you, what were you looking for? What were your some of, like, this is what I like in my 20s, or what I'm looking for in my 20s versus now in your 30s?
I mean, I would like to think that although it didn't exactly work out that way for at least most of my 20s, that I was always open to a relationship, but like the right relationship that made sense and, felt right and like worked for me. Um, but like I said, it didn't really work out that way. And maybe a part of that was because maybe I wasn't really in a best like relationship material, not necessarily in terms of like being promiscuous or anything like that, because if I'm single then I'm going to do whatever I want to do, but if I'm in a relationship then I'm in a relationship, and that's not really a challenge, to me. And even back then, like the whole process of dating and stuff like that, it was kind of like a drag most of the time. Like I didn't particularly enjoy it, for the most part. Sometimes I did, and it felt fun, and it was cool to kind of feel that like the world was your oyster, for lack of a better term, and that I could kind of go anywhere and do anything, and I didn't have to answer to anyone or anything like that. But like I said, at the end of the day, I would like to think that had, like, say for instance, the person I'm with now had come along back then, that I would have, been cool with being in a relationship. But also at the same time, my patience was not what it is now back then, even though it still is not as much as it should be. And my attitude and, the way I perceive things and reacted to things, um, maybe it wouldn't have worked like it did now in my 30s. And maybe some people that I dated in my 20s, if I had met them now as the version I am of myself, maybe it would have gotten serious or something like that.
Yeah, you made um, some really good points. You mentioned patience, and I know just kind of that's a thing I don't have. Patience is not one of my virtues. But for me, dating in my 20s, I did have relationships in my 20s, but I also did not want to be in relationships in my 20s. I was in college, I was in grad school, and it was kind of one of those things that my parents, aka my mom, was just always, she always told me, like, get your education, then focus on relationships. And I understood why she told me that. Um, and it was because of kind of what she went through. She was a young mom, and so she was just like, girl, get your, don't worry about these men. And so I think that I carried that longer than she may have wanted me to. But then, like, the type of men that I was encountering, like, I knew what it was. Like, these were not the men that you get in relationships with, because they were out there, and we're gonna have quotation marks on that. So it was fun for me, just kind of being like the good girl messing with the bad boys, whatever that may mean, and read between the lines in that. um I dated, not dated, I dealt with guys that you don't get in relationships with, and I knew that. But then, I did have relationships, and I mentioned this in previous podcasts. Like, when I was younger, I had like this long list of, like, if I'm gonna get in a relationship with you, you need to have this, this, this. And it was like all like 40 things. I'm like, it was so unrealistic. But I think I just wanted to know that the guy was serious about being in a relationship. So it's like we could chill. I'm good with chilling, but a relationship was a whole nother thing, for me. So yeah, it's just like, dating my 20s was kind of me just having fun. And sometimes that fun ended in a relationship that probably shouldn't have been. But you live and you learn. But I didn't have patience. And so when I didn't feel good about it, I hopped on up out of there. So, okay. So my next question is just standards. How has that changed in your 20s versus your 30s?
Um, it's changed significantly because I've changed, the things that I was interested in, the things that I was willing to accept or not accept, have changed. My goals and aspirations, and just a lot of those different things have changed. Also, too, when we were in our 20s, there was social media, but it wasn't nearly, like how it is now. It wasn't like this all encompassing thing. We still had flip phones for at least part of our 20s. So there was no apps, or, it wasn't just something you were constantly connected to. It was something you would use on a computer when you were in school or at home or something like that. And, people connected through it. And I'm sure some people maybe, were influenced to some degree, but it was nothing even remotely close, to how things are nowadays. And I think that's a big influencer of kind of like relationships and what people want, what people think is normal, or what is like a standard, for a relationship. So that, also influences, people a lot nowadays, but maybe not so much me because I didn't, necessarily come up during that time, when I was like really, really dating. Um, but yeah, so overall though, like I just think back to just when I was in my 20s, it was like kind of like how you mentioned, like kind of mostly focused on fun, meeting people, seeing what was out there, having experiences, and very much not necessarily focused on education in particular, but just focused on like trying to get to a higher level, trying to find a good job, trying to just become come into my own, as a young man. And I think that, in hindsight, the right woman not only could have fit into that equation, but she could have enhanced me a lot and helped me grow and mature faster than even what I did. But, unfortunately, at that time, and this is kind of something I wanted to ask you, is like the impact of like kind of like cultural or societal influences, where it's almost like what you were mentioning about your mom, where it's like, focus on your education, don't worry about dating, don't get pregnant, don't, I got kind of like a similar, lecture or whatever too, which, I kind of, take everything with a grain of salt, but I'd be lying if I said that that wasn't influencing my mindset, back at that time. Whereas now, as a almost 38-year-old person, I think that when I was 22 or 23, like I said, again, the right woman really could have been an addition to my life. I think the right anybody is an addition to your life, but especially a relationship. If you have a good, strong partner that motivates you and encourages you and just, wants you to be the best version of yourself, I think that that can really only be an asset. Now, if you're young and you don't, have the experience or the ability to discern between who's a good fit for you and who isn't, then you can wind up, in a situation that's kind of toxic, and that's, of course, not good. But um, the right person for you, I think, or for me at that time, could have, but that didn't work out. So, for the most part, I just kind of dated, like went on dates, and like I was like a young guy, so sometimes I was just looking to hook up and stuff. Like I always felt like I could kind of feel like what, like where a person belonged, meaning like, could this person potentially be something serious? Could this person be like cool to like go on dates with, hang out with, but nothing really more? Or was this just like a physical, like sexual, type of thing? So, most of the people that I interacted with, in my mind at least, fell into one of those three categories. So, that, could have, that impacted the way that I thought and felt, about people and dating and stuff like that. Um, but yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's difficult because the ones that I dated, it's just I don't know where they were down the line, but when I was dealing with them, it wasn't the right time. Whether it was the maturity level or they didn't want to put in that effort. But it was me, and let's not get things twisted too. It was me a bit, because it's just if I got into a relationship with them, I'm like, okay, let's see how this goes. But I was very career focused. I'm not gonna lie. But the other ones, no, So I think, and you mentioned like social media and things like that, and I've done that, like like the apps and the dating. Like I've done like this. I mentioned this in my podcast previously. Like I've done like the speed dating, and I have done like I did do eHarmony once. I did do Match once, and I did, but there's nothing like just meeting someone in person in that first impression. And it, I just feel like for me, just kind of my personality, the apps are just not great for me. um, and people can, you create the apps and you create and this, I guess that's dating, right? You create the best first impression, then you meet people in person and you like, bro, what is this? Um, but I can't, I mean, I've never been catfish. I haven't been long on the apps to get that. Um, but it's just, there's just so many ways that that can go wrong. I just would rather in person meet you. And that's the difference between the 20s and 30s. Now we have these apps and social media, and it's just like, what are you willing to do to date? Because, some people meet off of Facebook or whatever, and that's cool. I haven't done that, but maybe you can, I mean, I think you can maybe speak a little bit to that. But I mean, I guess I haven't caught up with the times enough. And I think with the pandemic, maybe I need to get on board. But maybe you can talk about just how social media or the difference with that, or just how things have changed and the adaptation of dating can be.
Yeah, definitely. So I was kind of like the opposite. Um, I never really considered myself to be like particularly charismatic. So, like meeting people in person sometimes would be like difficult for me because I just kind of be thinking like, what am I really gonna say? Like I would like I guess I would kind of like talk myself out of it. Like I would be thinking like I think of like three things that I could say that would maybe be like a quote unquote pickup line or like icebreaker or whatever. I'd be like, oh, she's already heard all of those, or she's probably busy, or she probably has a man. Like I would just kind of like usually like talk myself out of it in person. And also too, in person it felt more harsh when it wouldn't work and you would get turned down or like whatever. So I felt like I kind of thrived much more on the social media because I feel like the state of mind of people is very important when dating. Like you could catch someone on today at 2 p.m. and they could want nothing to do with you. And you could catch them Saturday night at 1 a.m. and they could be all about you. So like with the apps and stuff like that and the social media, I felt like it was kind of like a almost like a cheat code or something like that because you could see into the person. Like if we're just like in a grocery store or at the library or wherever, some place that people in their head imagine as being like a romantic place to like meet the love of their life, you have like nothing to go on. You just see a person, you're physically attracted to them, but you know nothing about them. But on the apps and on social media, you get a peek into their life, but then you also get talking points. You know what I'm saying? Like if you like the beach and they like the beach, that's a talking point. But if we're just like in a club or in wherever, it's like you don't really have those talking points. And if you're not charismatic like me, it can be difficult to just like say a funny joke or think of something like, sexy to say or like whatever. So I always felt like that was challenging. Also too, a lot of guys, I think they have a stronger ego than I do because you know I have friends that they're willing to get 99 no's for one yes, and I'm not willing to get any no's. Or at least I wasn't, when I was dating, like any kind of no or anything like that, it like pissed me off.
Hmm.
So I prefer the social media personally.
So you're saying accept these random friend requests I get on Instagram.
I think it's different for women though, because with guys, like women are not like really like it's the same thing in real life. Like the same way how in a club, like a woman 9 times out of 10 is not gonna come up to you and ask you to dance or ask what your name and phone number and your zodiac or anything like that. Women don't really do that on social media either because their
Hmm.
inboxes are flooded. And when I say social media, I'm sorry, I'm including like dating apps as well. But their inboxes are flooded, so it's like they don't have to, it's like they're not going to the grocery store because they get everything delivered by Instacart or DoorDash or something like that. So as with guys, you have to do the reaching out. So when I was on social media and dating apps and stuff like that, I would analyze the profile. First is the pics. Like, do the pics look real? Is there any pictures with other people in them? Like, is the person seem too attractive, or just is there anything fishy about the pics? If the pics checked out and seem authentic, then you look at the profile. Okay, what's this person's interest? What are you talking about? Blah blah blah. And then you send a message, and then they write back, and then depending on how the conversation goes, then you would go to the next step of trying to get a date with them, which would also usually include like sending pictures outside of the app or doing a video chat outside of the app. Like I was always like really like and I had to have confirmation that that the person was the person, and thankfully I never got catfish
Right.
either. But for women, I feel like it's different because the guys are constantly coming at them and coming, and the intentions, and most guys that are on dating apps are looking for sex. That's another thing too. Like the women, when you see a woman on a dating app and you see like her real life, like, oh, here's me like going apple picking with my friends, or I volunteer at an animal shelter on the weekend. It's like she's like being a real person and like trying to present her real self to get someone that could potentially be a relationship. And I'm not gonna say there's no guys, because I was kind of like both. Like I wanted a relationship, and I was cool with meeting someone online and that turning into a relationship. But also, if the person was just down for sex, like I was down for that too, if we were attracted to each other. But some people are about sex. Some people are looking for someone to take advantage of, like monetarily or financially or whatever, whatever. And I feel like I want to say like all the guys on apps and things are creeps, because that's not true. Because I was on there and I would like to think I
Hmm.
wasn't a creep, but it is definitely a higher ratio of like creep to cool guy than it is creep to cool girl. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, you were right, I guess, to be cautious, but I think you can still be cautious, but try it out and like really give like some energy and effort to it. That's what I would say.
Right. What are your thoughts on? And I don't know if I fleshed this question out fully, but wasting time versus valuing your own time. Because I feel like in your 20s, you're like, yo, I'm in it. I'm like, whatever happens. But then in your 30s, you're like, yo, I don't have time for this. um for me, that's the difference in dating. It's just like I'm in my 20s, I'm like, yo, I'm going with the flow, and I can speak on that. But then the 30s, it's like, what we doing? So just kind of, and I don't know what that means for you, but just kind of like in dating and relationships, wasting time versus value and time, or maybe all time is valuable. I don't know. Um, can you speak to that, if that makes, in my brain it makes sense, but can you speak to that a bit?
Yeah, I never really agreed with that. The general way that people phrase what's quote unquote wasting time. Like a lot of
Hmm.
people feel like if it doesn't turn into marriage, like, oh, it was a waste of time. Or if it's not a relationship, it's like, oh, it was a waste of time. And I never felt that way, because I always felt like if I have the choice between doing something with someone and it's pleasant, for the most part, and I get something out of it. Like, I enjoyed myself. I, had company while I was doing whatever. Then it was time well spent. You know what I'm saying? Like, um, and also too, as the guy, I always controlled like what happened as far as like going on dates and stuff like that. So if I was taking a woman on a date, of course I asked her opinion or was open to suggestions, but whatever we landed on was something I felt comfortable with where it's like I'm going to enjoy this. Like even if I was by myself or if I was with a friend or whatever, I would be cool
Mm-hmm.
with doing this thing. Like I never let anyone pressure me into like doing something or going somewhere or choosing a date that I wasn't going to get anything out of in terms of like entertainment or fun or anything like that. So I always looked at it that if I went on a date and the we had a good time or I had a good time, then it was cool. Even if I never seen the person again, or even if it didn't turn to a relationship or marriage or whatever, it still was like a fun, thing that hopefully I enjoyed and, will remember, into the future. Um, Now, also too, to add on to that, like in your 20s, of course, you literally, at least me, I felt like almost like immortal. Like I didn't even think about time. I didn't think about getting old or the future or like like in any like real capacity. It was just like it just felt like I had limitless life and limitless energy, and like I just everything just was so fun, especially moving to New York City from Rochester. It was like um just so different, and I just was like a sponge, just like absorbing it all and like taking it all in, and I just was really kind of having like the time of my life. um Whereas now I'm like, which also too, just sidetrack a little bit, like a lot of times people waste their like 20s like having fun, and then of course you always want to have fun, but like they go like overboard, I feel like, and they don't really prepare for the future, because once you start to get this age, you already is like tired of working. So it's like if it was culturally more like
Mm-hmm.
normal to like work harder when you were younger, and then so you could enjoy being older more, or like even, and when I say older, even like the age we are now, um that I think that would benefit people a lot more. But anyway, so now I'm just much more, my priorities and things have shifted, and it's not so much not I don't even say not so much, it's not at all about like going to the club or meeting people, or like even before I got in this relationship, just being in my mid 30s, I wasn't going to those places, and I wasn't interested really in that type of scene. The only time I would really ever go out is like if I was on vacation or, something like that. But on a normal day to day, I had gotten into a mode where it was like, hey, you want to go to brunch, or hey, you want to have dinner, like actual dinner. Like, and I don't even mean just
Mm-hmm.
like romantically, like even platonically, like us, like we haven't gone to no club. We used to go to the club every single weekend. We haven't gone to a club in freaking like 10 years. You know what I'm saying? It
Lord.
was just like, hey, you come to town, I come to town, we go get something to eat, and then we go to sleep at a reasonable hour. Like, um, and I enjoyed that. Like, that was really enjoyable
Yeah.
for me. Like, I know when I was younger, I always remember like there being older people that seemed like they just couldn't let go of their younger years. And I'm happy to be a person that is older now and is totally cool with the 20s, staying in the 20s. but
Mm-hmm.
um but to go back to the first question you asked me, so yeah, I don't think that it's wasted time, and I think people kind of like mess themselves up and kind of like sabotage themselves thinking like that, and especially when you're in your 30s, because a lot of times what people do in their 30s is they put so much pressure and so much stress on the relationship, forcing
Mm-hmm.
things to happen because they feel like the clock is ticking, and so on and so forth, and they don't let the relationship and the romance and the spark like develop organically. Like, yeah, the clock is ticking, like, okay, yeah, you might want to have kids if you don't have none, or have more, or you might want to get married or whatever, but come on, like, being in your 30s is most likely not even half your life. It's like you could still pace yourself and take your time and, let things evolve without like making it feel like a pressure cooker or rushing it. So that's kind of like how I feel. How about you?
Yeah, I think just in regards to wasting time, I know I've known people, and I'm thinking of one person in particular, like they just always, actually, I'm thinking more than one, had to be in a relationship when they knew it wasn't gonna go anywhere, but it just, they had to have that partner. And it's just, you're wasting time. I know you're not feeling this person. And I've
Hmm.
always felt bad for that. It was always a female, and the guy was the one that they didn't want to be with. Um, and it's just like, I don't want to waste anybody's time. If I'm not feeling you, you probably would know, because I don't have the social skills really to keep something going, and I don't want to hurt people. I try to, but I think it's just like, also with their 20s, it's just like, oh, okay, but we can, but then, okay, now, because I never want that to happen to me, where someone's like connected to me because they felt whatever, and then they really didn't see a future with me. I always try to see the other side of the coin.
Hmm.
Um, but now in my 30s, I don't have like that child clock. I don't want to have kids. I never did. So that clock's not ticking. But I do want to get married, but I don't waste my time. I don't have my patience never, I always say I'm my father's child. He was very impatient, like, just don't waste my time. And so I try not to waste others because I don't want my time wasted. And it's hard, because I think when you get in your 30s, especially when you get, 30s, almost 40s, and you be like, oh, well, I don't know if someone else gonna come along. That don't mean that you stick to someone that you don't really feel good about. Like,
Right.
that is time wasted because you're not fully happy. So I don't want to never get into that predicament where I'm just holding on to strands. I'm like, well, he here.
And that I
uh,
agree with. That's a valid point that I think I neglected to touch on, is that is kind of what I would maybe consider to be time wasted. And I think
right.
one of the reasons why I didn't really have many serious relationships, because I just didn't want to get into a relationship if I didn't strongly feel that there was at least the potential for it to last forever, like to lead to marriage. I'm not totally against having kids, but it's not like a big aspiration of mine. Um, but that it would just be something that would last forever. So there were people that were like very cool and like, here for a season type of thing or whatever, but I didn't get that like forever vibe from them. So it's like, yeah, we could have been in a relationship and we could have dated for a year or 2 years or five or however long, but it wouldn't have been for the long haul. So yeah, I agree with that point that you make.
Yeah, you know, because I've seen it happen. It's just like, a piece of man, that's not good for me. Like, I don't believe in perfection. I just want like a healthy relationship, whatever that may mean. I don't know, but I've seen it happen. It's like, a piece of man is good for me. Nah, bro, I'm all right. So, um, I don't, and that leads into my next topic. It's just that settling. We're in our 30s. I'm a little farther in my 30s. Just that settling piece. Like, I I know you didn't settle, but like as we get old, like in our 20s, we not settling. I hope, we living our best life. But in the 30s, we're like, oh, okay, this didn't happen. So just kind of, what are your thoughts on just relationships and settling, or like, okay, what's good, what are your thoughts about that?
I think that, and I don't know if it, and maybe it was a mixture of both. I feel like the relationship that I'm in now is like how it came to be is like a combination of me being more definitive and like just knowing myself, having a better relationship with myself, and knowing what I want and being ready. You know what I'm saying? Like, because you can be ready and you can not be ready. So like being ready, and also too, um, just like kind of like wanting it. You know what I'm saying? Um, because in my 20s, I just, like I said, I like to think that I could have been in a relationship, but maybe like in reality, like I kind of like wasn't like really truly ready, because I didn't, when I met, my woman that I'm with now, I didn't want to waste time. Like I was very definitive. Like, like we dated for about like 3 or 4 months, and it was like kind of long distance. Like she lived like about hour and a half away, and I feel like if you can't like go over to the person's house and like come back home in the same night, then it don't matter if they live in California or an hour away. Is like kind of like borderline the same thing. So we were only able to really see each other like once a month or whatever. So it wasn't like that every day, which maybe might have been helpful too, because that's something that, in the past I had made a mistake of like spending too much time with the person, and I think it kind of hurt the potential for it to become a relationship. But in any event, so yeah, so we started dating in like July, and then in like June I asked her did she want to be in a relationship, and then the following year in September we moved in together, and we've been living together since. So like, man, like for that to happen that fast, like for me to, if I was to go to my like 25-year-old self and say, hey, I'm gonna meet a girl and be getting into a relationship with her within like 3 months, and then like be in a relationship or be living together in like a year, um I never would have believed it. But like I just was ready, and I just felt very definitive, and I felt like I didn't want to waste time. I didn't want to linger on forever. And also too, nothing for nothing, I felt like when you're in your 20s, like if I when I was in my 20s, if I would have been involved with someone, I would have felt totally fine being like, oh, that's my girlfriend, that's my girl, oh yeah, her apartment's over here and my apartment's over there, and we're dating and blah blah blah. I would have had no problem with that. That would have been totally cool. I would have liked it. It would have been fine. But one thing I've noticed about myself is like in my age I am now, like, approaching 40, it's like embarrassing to talk like that. Like even now, like that we're not married yet. Like I don't like to say like my girlfriend, because it sounds childish. You know what I'm saying? And I would not feel comfortable. Yeah, for seriously. And I would not feel
Mm-hmm.
comfortable if we were together in like in a serious committed relationship, but like she was somewhere paying her own bills and I'm over here paying my own bills, and we just coming home
Mm-hmm.
alone and just seeing each other when we see each other. I feel like that just is like kind of like sophomoric. So I feel like that this is a part of like I said, just being ready. Like I don't want to have childish titles, I don't want to do childish things. I'm just in adult mode.
Yeah. Sorry, one moment. I gotta plug my laptop in.
So, in the meantime, while we wait, even though this is probably going to be edited out, I'm going to tell you guys a classic Rochelle story. So, this one time I came home to visit, and I'm like, oh, let me hang out with my girl Rochelle. So, she's like, hey, did you know Angela Winbush is in town? She's having a concert. Do you want to go to the concert? I'm like, yeah, I'm down to go to the concert. So we go to the concert. It's at I think it was at the museum if I'm not mistaken. It was like a cool venue. We're having a a good time. We're chilling, waiting for Angela Winbush to come on. I think there was like an opener or two, something like that. And they had a bar. So I've always been the kind of person that I cannot drink like a lot of liquids other than like water, especially if I'm thirsty or exercising. But normally, like when it comes to like alcohol and stuff, I want to consume as like few liquid as possible. So I've never been like big on beers or anything like that. In my older age, I've mostly just drink wine now, but back then I was a cocktail person, and in particular, my cocktail of a choice was a Manhattan martini. Now I'm gonna be real with you, and this is embarrassing because I've been drinking this for a long time. I don't even know exactly what's in a Manhattan martini. I know it's like bourbon, and there's like 3 or 4 liquors or something like that in it. But it's like a strong drink. It's considered like a quote unquote, I don't know, you can't say this nowadays, but like a manly drink, like something like James Bond or somebody would drink. And so that's what I drink. Now, your girl Rochelle does not drink those kinds of drinks. And I have no idea why. But I think just because sometimes, once in a while, your girl Rochelle has has to be competitive and has to try to prove a point, even if it's to her own detriment. So she decides that on this night when we're at this, Angela Winbush show, that she's gonna drink Manhattan martinis too, and she's gonna drink just as many as I drink, and all this kind of stuff. Now,
What are
I drink
you
Manhattan
talking
martinis. I'm not no big
about?
drinker, like I never have been, but I can easily have like 3 or 4 Manhattan martinis and like just have like a little decent buzz, like nothing crazy. Your girl, yeah, your girl, your girl Rochelle had, I think she had one She had one, and again, remind you, we've been friends basically our whole adult lives, like of drinking age. And she had one, and I could already tell she was getting into Rochelle mode. So I'm like, okay, cool, like whatever. How is it? She's like, oh yeah, it's good. Yeah, this ain't nothing. Blah blah blah, all this stuff. I'm like, okay, you say so. So I'm like, all right, I'm about to go get me another drink. So I'm thinking that she's gonna have the sense to be like, okay, this is not. I'm out of my league here. Like, let me just get a little glass of wine or like a pina colada or something like that. Nope. Your girl Rochelle is like, oh, I'm gonna get another one too. Then I'm like, oh god. I'm like, all right, suit yourself. Make a long story short, your girl Rochelle was out for the count. This Angela Winbush show was just supposed to be like a prelude to the evening. We was supposed to go to this Angela Winbush show. It was gonna end at like 10 or 11. And then we was gonna paint the town red because we were still relatively young at that age, and we didn't get to see each other that often. So I could see that she's wild woozy. So I'm like, yeah, like, okay, you ready to go down to the strip, like to go to the club and things like that? She's like, you gonna have to take me home. I'm like, what? I'm like, this is crazy. I'm telling you, when I tell you that there was some shit being talked, like she was just talking like she was the drink champion. Like Noriega and them didn't have nothing on her. She hold her liquor, and nobody could outdrink her. And who did I think I was talking to, that I thought she couldn't handle this Manhattan martinis or whatever. And when I tell you, I think she might have even fell asleep. And it was like literally like a 5-minute drive from the museum to me dropping her off at her apartment. And that was just my little interlude with the classic story about your girl Rochelle. Hopefully this gets included in the show.
First of all, I had to plug in my laptop. Why you told that story when I wasn't here? Second of all, I don't know what happened. I can hold my liquor, first of all. And then, second of all, but that was a night. I don't know.
That's cap, y'all. I have other pictures of time that she came to New York, and y'all don't know this because this is just a podcast and there's no video. But your girl Rochelle, there is not a follicle out of place on her head ever. And we got pictures. You can see it in her eyes. You can see that her hair is not perfectly slicked down. That so all this stuff about she could hold liquor and all these things. Maybe it never was that bad as that time, but yeah.
Honestly, probably it's just I felt safe enough to be able to get lit. I know Gio would take care of whatever. So, but I can hold my liquor. But, yeah, that Angela Wimbush concert was a time. And I do
Oh,
remember
she had them.
visiting Geo. There was some points of the night missing. There was some lit nights in New York. Yeah. Yep. Hmm.
Yeah, we'll save that for another time because those are some stories too, y'all. I'll tell y'all that at a different time that Rochelle has technical difficulties.
Oh. Oh God, where are we? Um, I don't even know where. Oh, so we sped ahead, but I wanted to go back to this. Like, what is considered a date? Like,
Hmm.
um, I'm just gonna leave that there.
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and I feel like this is something that is highly contested by people
Yeah.
all of the time, both men and women and giraffes, and everybody is always debating on what is a date and what isn't a date. um I feel like for me, for something to be a date, and this is just me, both people got to know it's a date. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, there has to be some romantic feelings, it has to be discussed. I always would make a point to literally say date, like, because some people try to be like, I guess, cool. Like the thing now, and this is what bothers me about like modern, and even like when I was in my 20s, it just irked me that everybody's so cool. Like, everyone's too cool. Nobody ever wants to feel like they got played or somebody got one over on them. So it just turns into like this battle of like vagueness and like nondescript language, so that if worse comes to worse, a person be like, well, I never said it was a date anyway, or whatever the case may be. So people be using these terms like, oh yeah, you want to chill, you want to link. What the hell does chilling and linking mean? Like, nobody really knows. So facts. So I would always make a
Right.
point to say like, do you want to go on a date Saturday?
Yeah.
Or hey, would you like to go on a date Friday? So that's like the first,
Be
and
intentional.
maybe the only thing. Yeah, yeah. Maybe that's now that I think about it. I was gonna say some other stuff, but that's just kind of it. You agree that it's a date before you even leave your
Hmm.
house. Like, establish the fact that it's a date. That's boom. I think I like that. I'm just leave it right there.
Yeah. And like for me, I mean, I'm a little different. I do know what a date is, but I also know that I don't like people say your first date shouldn't be at a dude house because you know what that means. I mean, I get it, but also I know what it is and what it ain't. And I know sometimes I ain't trying to be out with the dude just yet. So you gotta understand when you at a dude house, sometimes, most times it is what it is. But a date is a date. Like, when you take me out and we go have an event, that is a date. And so it's just, that's why I said be intentional. And if you don't know the individual, get clarity. because it's hard. I mean, I'm a different. People used to tell me I date like a dude, and yes, I. Okay. Um, but be intentional. If you want to date, make sure it's a date and get the date and do and say date, because and if you want the date, make the date. Especially in 2022. Like, it's just don't have questions. Um, but also,
Yeah, because anything could be a date.
right,
I agree with you. Like a date doesn't have like some people will feel like, and I've heard this before too. Like it's only a date if it's at like if you have to dress up or it's at like some type of like nice establishment.
no,
A date is just if two people agree it's a date. A
right,
date, like I've had dates that was just a walk in the park. I've had dates that was meeting up at a place and have a drink. I've had dates that were dinner. You could have dates in the house. Like even if you like I know everybody like especially when you're meeting someone, people look at like, oh, it's Netflix and chill or whatever. It's Netflix and chill if you make it Netflix and chill. But if you cook dinner for someone and you invite them over
yeah.
and then you guys eat the meal and then go your separate ways, that it's still a date if you agree that it was a date.
Yeah, and I have someone who's like, don't be a cheap date. I don't care about the money. Yo, you can take me to the beach and as free as can be, but if we say it's a date, it's a date. You know what I'm saying? Like, the money can come down the line, but it's that time spent. It's that getting to know. If it's a date, it's a date. You know what I'm saying? It's just, it doesn't matter what it is. It's that quality time, and we said it was a date. Hopefully you take me out to dinner, at some point. But the way that I am, you may not get that second date if I don't want to deal with you. You know what I'm saying? So it's just like,
Hmm.
a date is a date. Be intentional on what you want. And the other person too, get that clarification. So that's it.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
we're wrapping up here. So, dating in your 20s versus your 30s, and you have probably more experience. What's better? Or not? Yeah, what's better? Or do you feel like you are more prepared? Or what do you want to say in regards to 20s versus 30s?
I would say that one thing I can definitely attest to is that it was 1000% more fun when I was in my 20s. Um because it's like, your standards are low. Like, I
Right.
you don't really got like no nice
Mm,
apartment. You got like a bullshit job. Like you just like just a young person, like, and you just so open and so like, excited about, everything. And, you are not also too having been like beaten down and jaded by like your past lovers and stuff like that, so you have
mm-hmm,
like more trust for people and like more patience in a different way, like patience in the sense of like you're not so quick to be like, nope, this ain't for me, or nope, this person, and like you're not so dismissive. So you're kind of like willing to put up with more, even if sometimes that maybe might not be what you should be doing, but you're just like more tolerant, in your 20s. So I had a really good time in my 20s. In my 30s, I would say, nothing for nothing, I had some really good dating experiences in my 30s. If I'm going to be honest, I probably had more, even though it didn't turn into a relationship, I did more serious dating in my 30s.
mm-hmm.
Like in my 20s, it was more like whoever came along, we go on a couple days, we do whatever it is that we do, or go wherever it is that we go. And, it was like easy to fall off with people, in my 20s, because everyone was just, doing their own thing. But in your 30s, I feel like everyone is a little more intentional, and everyone, kind of low key, maybe some more than others, but everyone to an extent, I think, feels a little anxiety about being in their 30s and being single. So people usually, and this isn't, don't put this to everybody, but usually don't play quite as much games, and there's not quite as much silliness and foolishness going on, and you can just do more. Like, I had more money in my 30s. I had more uh just maturity and everything. Like, in my 30s, like, I dated like a person that lived in Miami, and some I go just things I wanted to do, like I never done before. Like, if I could, I would try to line it up with a date so that I had company. If a friend or something wasn't available. So I just like went on better quality dates. And also too, I more so in most of my 30s was like a series of quasi relationships where I was pretty much dating one person for the most part, but we were not like quote unquote
Mm-hmm.
official. It was like that type of thing. So I had like more of those. Like, it wasn't as much as like one night stand or F buddies, or like, it was just more like starting that process of like slowing down, focusing on people a little bit more, being more intentional, even if I wasn't like fully there yet. But that was like the contrast, I would say, between like my 20s and my 30s. So it was more wild type of fun in my 20s, but now that I think about it, it was more like quality fun in my 30s, if that makes sense.
Yeah. For me, I think it was just my inhibitions were lower, and it was fun. I experienced some negative things, and for the most part, nothing, but it's when your standards are lower, of course. But
Hmm.
also, I learned a lot. And so now in my 30s, I'm more intentional. I had standards, but I'm like, girl, you all right? In my 20s, that's not realistic. So my standards, I feel like in my 30s are more realistic, because in my 20s, I was like, I don't want no man that got kids, and I don't want kids, and bruh, I'm too old. Men be having kids in my 30s. Um,
Hmm.
so I'm more
Word.
realistic about my standards. I'm more intentional, and it's more serious, I think, for me. But I hope, would still be fun. I haven't really dated in a bit. Pandemic dramas, but um, I had a time and a half in my 20s, and I learned a lot, and I'm appreciative of that learning experience, and I needed to go through it, even you know whatever it was. So it's definitely different, and I hope that my maturation has is showing. If you're still dating the same way in your 30s as your 20s, I'm gonna have a conversation with you on the side. So,
Hmm.
yeah, that is this episode, this installment of the male perspective with G.O. The two episodes we've done, and he didn't know what he was. I'm always surprising him. Hi, has been on relationships, but moving forward, I want his perspective, not necessarily. It doesn't have to be the male, just his perspective on whatever. So the next episode, we haven't talked about it. It doesn't have to be in relationships. It can be on whatever. I appreciate whatever he brings to the podcast. So, I thank him today and always, and I thank all of you for listening. And until next episode, take care of yourselves, and if you are able, take care of each other. And this is your girl, Rochelle.